And we're already seeing movements where thruples and others are being welcomed and celebrated.
You don't want gay marriage, right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to try to argue that, you're going to get bodied.
Kids do best in when they're raised with their biological mother and their biological father.
Not trying to be mean, but that was a crazy, crazy word salad, and you didn't address at all what I just explained.
I have a dear friend from college who grew up. She has two moms, so she had a sperm donor. Did they do something immoral by creating her with a sperm donor? Yes or no, Tyler?
I mean, I think...
Are conservatives coming after gay marriage after all? It's probably not going anywhere anytime soon, and it doesn't have widespread support or buy-in from Republicans just yet, but a coalition of conservative commentators and traditionalist activist organizations just launched a new campaign seeking to overturn the Supreme Court case that established gay marriage nationwide. And they're making a truly bizarre argument that makes very little sense. Here's a clip from their launch video.
We now have these trite phrases like love makes a family, or all you need is just love. As long as your physical needs are met and someone is cheering you on, then apparently you'll grow up fine.
But the kids aren't fine. The kids haven't been fine for quite some time.
You redefine marriage, you have just destroyed the house. You can put together a new house and claim it's the same. Children will know the difference. It harms children in virtually every way imaginable.
We're prioritizing the fantasies of adults, no matter how earnestly those fantasies are felt, over the real needs and the real good of children.
Redefining marriage robs children of the natural right to their mother and father.
And it puts adult desires over children's needs. It has to stop. Children
are greater.
Children
Are greater
Children are greater
than equal.
And it's time we fought for their rights.
At face value, this argument doesn't really make sense. It seems like their main objection is about gay people having or raising children, not about them being married. And those things are only tangentially related. Gay people have had families and have raised children for decades, long before Obergefell or before gay marriage was legal in all states. And the vast majority of married gay people don't have or want children. Instead, they value access to marriage for the important legal, tax, health insurance, inheritance, immigration, and many other rights and benefits that it brings. Anyway, as a gay or lesbian couple, you don't have to be married to adopt a child or have one through surrogacy or sperm donation. Getting rid of gay marriage or overturning Obergefell wouldn't stop any of these things or change that reality. So making an anti-gay marriage campaign centered entirely around the children just feels like an emotionally manipulative, rhetorical tool. If what they really want is to just ban gay people from having families, they should say so plainly, not conflate it with a related but distinct issue. They're also just wrong about what's best for the children anyway. A Cornell research review of 79 studies found that 75 showed children raised by same-sex couples fare no worse than other children. Some studies even suggest they fare slightly better on some metrics, but that's likely just a reflection of the fact that gay people who have kids tend to be very affluent, and just 4 studies showed any worse outcomes. But those studies evaluated in part children who came out of a broken home, one where a parent through separation or divorce then came out as gay. And those worse outcomes likely reflect that family breakup much more than they tell us anything about how children raised from birth by same-sex couples actually fare. More importantly, the alternative reality that these conservatives are proposing is not some utopia where every child is born in a happy family with a biological mother and father. It's that many children, like those, for example, born to lesbian couples with sperm donation, aren't born at all. If you ask me, that's a world where everyone involved is worse off. And destroying millions of people's marriages in the process of pursuing such a goal doesn't make any sense. That's just my take, though, and the debate here is really only beginning. Joining me to discuss all of this is the liberal YouTuber and political commentator Luke Beasley and the conservative commentator Tyler O'Neill, a senior editor at the Daily Signal. Let's get into it. So Tyler, obviously this is a fraught issue, but you're here for a reason. I want to hear your thoughts on why I'm wrong and why this coalition is right.
Well, I think the coalition, the biggest argument that the coalition has going for it is that Obergefell was wrongly decided. We don't have in the Constitution a clear statement in the 14th Amendment saying that marriage has to be interpreted as both man and woman, as well as male and female. So what we have already there is a shaky foundation. And if you look at what would happen, so when the Congress passed the Respect for Marriage Act, it didn't actually codify Obergefell. If you were to overturn Obergefell, that act would still remain, but that law says that once a marriage has been certified in one place, it has to be honored in all the other states. And so when you overturn Obergefell, that actually would allow states to go back to a system like we had when Roe was overturned, where one state says, we believe marriage is between one man and one woman, and we believe that marriage can be between adults of any gender. Now, the other thing here is if you're talking about dignity, and that is the grounding, as Obergefell makes it, it's very hard to make the argument that marriage needs to be limited to just two people. And we're already seeing movements where thruples and others are being welcomed and celebrated. So it's an interesting and important question, I think, as to what marriage means. And to be honest, I think a lot of the legal benefits that gay couples get from marriage can also be gotten from civil unions. And my ideal situation would be that you have churches recognize one form of marriage and government recognize another form of marriage that does not claim the same moral authority.
So, Tyler, I have many follow-up questions for you, but first I just want to
Yes.
give Luke the floor briefly for his thoughts.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, Brad, you spoiled a lot of my points and brilliantly did so. Just a quick point of clarification, Tyler, because I'm not as interested in, based on the video I saw that you posted, debating whether or not a strong legal challenge could be brought. It's like, that'll be litigated, we'll see. But aren't we more discussing the principle of it? Like, you're not saying you would support enshrining gay marriage through a different legal means and you just believe the way it was ruled on was not constitutional. You don't want gay marriage, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so then let's litigate that, because the video just acts
It doesn't
like,
talk about legal arguments. It talks about kids.
it talks about kids, and it acts like we all just know that the data points towards children do worse in same-sex households. And if you're going to try to argue that, you're going to get bodied, Tyler, because the body of, oh my gosh, I sound so like Newsom right now, of medical and scientific research points to the exact opposite conclusion. And I can go through some of that if you want. I don't know how much time I have. I have a bunch of different references that we can go through if you're interested. But the real, if you zoom out, the real argument here is, as Brad said, no matter what you do, you're not changing the fact that already 2 to 3 million kids are in same-sex households, that same-sex couples are going to have kids through all sorts of different means. Even if they bring a kid into a marriage that was from a previous heterosexual relationship, it's a fact of our world that same-sex couples are going to be couples, and then some of them are going to have kids. And so if the whole argument is we want to do what's best for the children, then I can tell you, your activism only has a chance at removing the marriage component, which just means you're trying to make life worse for the children who would already be in same-sex homes. And that's what we see when you remove those legal protections, as referenced by Brad, the different benefits that come with marriage and the stability and the likelihood of couples staying together and building a more stable long-term family. If you remove that, the kids still exist, the couples still exist, but the well-being of the children just gets worse. So it's
Tyler,
wait,
yeah, so
why
I'll
are you
put a
citing
question
children?
to you, and I am not going to yell at you, not going to call you names. I genuinely want to earnest dialogue about this.
No, you guys have been... Yeah.
My main question is, shouldn't they just be honest? Because it sounds to me like basically everyone in that video wants to ban gay people from having kids, right, wants to make it illegal for gay people to adopt, probably make surrogacy illegal, probably make sperm donation illegal. That at least should, if what they believe, what they're saying in the video, that should be what they're calling for. Do you understand why it's strange to me that they're conflating this with the marriage question?
Well, so to some degree, I understand why you think that's strange. Marriage as an institution historically has been about procreation. And that's one of the main reasons why the government recognizes marriage in the first place. So this whole debate does involve the children. So the questions of whether kids do best in which circumstances. So they were saying, and I think the data generally stands, that kids do best in when they're raised with their biological mother and their biological father. But that does not mean that there aren't confounding variables. That does not mean that kids who are in same-sex families have always bad outcomes. Obviously, that isn't the case. The main claim that they're making is that children have a right to be raised by their biological father and their biological mother. And if that is the centerpiece of marriage law, that changes a lot of things. And by the way, that also changes things like no-fault divorce. That changes things like these people are not inconsistent morally. They're not pro all forms of heterosexual marriage and against all forms of same-sex unions on everything. It's the issue is, if you believe that the nuclear family is the rightful bedrock of society, is the, man, woman, and their children is the ideal formation. That doesn't mean that people who don't fall into that need to be second-class citizens or looked down upon or any way. But the main thing that you have, if you're going to build society on that marriage family formation, it involves changing the laws that we have right now. And one of the main things to do is to get rid of this Supreme Court ruling that is doing what Roe v. Wade did on this issue.
I think it's clear they want to do more than just overturn Obergefell. I'm about to come to you, Luke, but they want to do more than just overturn the court case and send it back to the states. The activists in this video seem to me to very clearly want to make it illegal for gay people to have children through the means we've discussed. And we'll come back to the point, Tyler, about children and right to mother, right to father. I have some follow-up questions about that. But Luke, first, just your thoughts.
Okay, again, I'm not trying to be mean, but that was a crazy, crazy word salad, and you didn't address at all what I just explained, which is, if all that video talked about was children, 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 we have to put children over equal. But if you don't prioritize equal, in this case, with what we're talking about with gay marriage, you're doing what's worse for the children. Let me go just really quickly. All the following organizations agree that children by same-sex parents do just as well, and as Brad referenced in some studies, better for different reasons, than those raised by opposite-sex parents. The American Academy of Pediatrics, American Psychological Association, American Medical Association, American Sociological Association. That's based on decades of peer-reviewed research. The few studies that contradict that have wild methodological issues. And this is measuring emotional health, academic performance, behavioral issues, substance abuse, delinquency, social development. What does matter? So those all things stay the same based on same-sex versus opposite sex. What does matter is not the sexual orientation of the parents, but the parental stability, economic stability, low conflict at home, access to legal protections. And you can hear, as I'm listing those, marriage, allowing couples that would already exist with kids who would already exist to get married, just enshrines more of those factors that improve the well-being of the children. That's what the research actually demonstrates. An example of this is that child poverty among kids in same-sex households declined after marriage equality became a reality. So just try to engage with that as opposed to just a bunch of language about a mom and a dad. Yeah, we love the moms and the dads with families. And also, there's other families that you would just be worsening the conditions for the kids if you removed their parents' ability to be married because of if one parent dies and the other one's not technically legal parent and they're not married, then all of a sudden you have this instability for the kid, or the ability for the insurance of the employer of a parent to be used for the child, the financial stability that comes with marriage. All those things you would be wanting to remove, not to mention the more societal
Well, let's
dedication.
give Tyler a response.
Last thing.
You said
Last thing.
Yeah.
Not to mention the societal dedication that marriage represents that causes people to stay together longer, which is good for the kids. So engage with that, please.
But you said their parents. And I think that is fundamentally the issue here, is when we're talking about same-sex couples and adopting. Now, some kids may be better off being adopted by a same-sex couple than being in an orphanage when their situations are worse otherwise. But we're talking, children come from a mother and a father. And there are some technologies that they've developed that have a lot of moral complications. I mean, do you know the surrogacy issue, the issue of how many embryos they make with IVF? Like there are a lot of concerns that people have, and I think they're legitimate moral concerns.
But that's not just gay people. That's vastly also done by heterosexual people.
Yes, as we've established here, this campaign is not just
let Tyler
about
finish.
overturning same-sex marriage in Obergefell. It's about trying to get to a place where children are given their right to be raised by their biological mother and their biological father is paramount. And that is the foundation of family law.
You posted
That's
this
what
just
these
real
people
quick.
are going
A
for.
broad coalition of pro-family groups is organizing to overturn Obergefell. You just said it's not about overturning Obergefell.
It's not just about overturning Obergefell. If you look at the website, yeah.
Well, that is definitely the focus.
That's what you just
It
said.
is the focus. Yeah.
So explain, why do you want kids to be worse off who already exist, because you would be taking away their parents' ability to be married that comes with it all sorts of factors that actually improve the children's outcomes. That's what you can't cite the children and then all the data contradicts how well the children would do with your policy.
Tyler, yeah.
Overturning Obergefell would not dissolve the unions that already exist. It would not take the kids away from these parents. And it would allow states to make their own rules on this. So, yes, and that's why I'm engaging when you say, Luke, you're and both of you are saying, like, this isn't just about overturning Obergefell, and I don't think it is either. But I think the ultimate goal is not to harm children and to hurt families that exist now.
Do you think
goal
that
is
same-sex families harm children by adopting them or having them without a biological mother and father? Yes?
I don't think they harm children.
Then what's the harming of children that's being averted that you just said?
The harming of children is where the centerpiece of the marriage law and family law is. Is that centerpiece on fulfilling the desires of adults, or is it on actually what's best for the kids? And this campaign is about shifting that focus away from focusing on the desires of adults and toward the needs and rights of children as they see it. That's the main thing that I'm in agreement with the campaign on. I am not familiar with all of the studies that they're relying on. I am familiar with the organizations, Luke, that you just cited. And unfortunately, these are institutions that I don't trust because I've seen them captured by gender ideology. And right now we're in a very interesting time where these groups that went whole hog for every transgender intervention are suddenly saying, oh, well, maybe now that the American Society of Plastic Surgeons is saying that you shouldn't have transgender surgery until you're 19, maybe we're going to dial back our support for this just a little bit. But by the way, we're going to put hedging language in there because we still, it seems as though they still believe this. Any organization that went whole hog for gender ideology and for mutilating kids in the name of their identifying as the opposite sex loses a lot of its credibility.
Tyler,
in my
listen, you
mind.
actually, hang on, I'll come to you, Luke. I just want to say that I think you have a point there in that they made a bunch of statements about consensus and data that were not accurate, and they're slowly walking back, and we've seen challenged. I mean, Luke, we can't just blindly trust the experts, right? The argument I think we've seen through COVID and then through some of the gender stuff Tyler mentions, the analysis doesn't just stop with what the American Medical Association says.
Yeah, I'd rather trust the experts than Tyler, but I agree. That's why I was trying to explain that when you can also look at the studies and how they conducted it and interact with the data yourself, which you can also do with trans-related studies, which is what people who have pushed back in more thoughtful ways have done, is actually engage with the studies themselves as opposed to just going, I don't know, I don't trust anything that comes out of there. And I think you, even if you examine them, would be like, no, this is well done research, and I agree. But then also, aside from even, which is why I tried to start with less like, here's different institutions that conducted different batches of research that support my argument, just kind of zooming out away from the specifics and explaining like the logic of it, which I think any rational thinker can kind of understand, which is, all right, we agree in our current society, you're not going to prevent gay people from being with each other. All right. And then there's all of these factors, even if you did move the needle on like who's allowed to do surrogacy or who's allowed to adopt, there's still already scenarios where people have relationships and there's a kid under their guardianship and they're a same-sex couple. And so when you think about that, and it's the same thing even taking away the kid that I've tried to explain before to conservatives, which is if you're going to have the couples and you're going to have kids involved in some percentage of those couples, then why wouldn't we want to encourage people to be in more dedicated, more legally binding relationships that I think stabilize our society, stabilize families, encouraging that sort of pro-family mentality in general, and understanding that marriage is only a way for the institution to give some backing to, hey, long-term committed relationships that are a little bit more than just dating and that provide more legal protections because of that. That just logic makes sense, even if you had trust issues with the data that substantiates it.
Well, I think if you were to look at civil unions and if we were to have a system where we say, like, legally, you have all the same rights, but we're not going to consider, like, if
Why?
you
Why
look,
would you make it all the same, but just with a different word?
because Obergefell, if you look at the text of the case that we are ostensibly, or at least in part discussing here, is all about, it centers on the word dignity. It centers on redefining marriage as a cultural push to change the culture. And what we've seen when this culture has been changed is the demonization of groups that oppose the LGBT agenda. We've seen the Southern Poverty Law Center, which, puts mainstream conservative and Christian groups on a hate map with chapters of the Ku Klux Klan, put more and more conservative groups there. And we've seen them gain a tremendous impact in the Biden administration and in the left in general. And right now, the FBI is swearing them off because Trump is president. I don't know how long that would last. If Trump is not president in 2029, how much more influence will the Southern Poverty Law Center again have in the federal government? And the main thing that I've seen from Obergefell is that this message that the conservative Christians, Jews, Muslims, even atheists who believe that marriage is, as it has traditionally been understood, between a man and a woman, were told that their view is inherently less than, is inherently undignified. And that is shifting the permission structure. And if you look at these things, we had a debate all through the 90s into the 2000s. There was a lot of ground that the conservative Christians were willing to give on this when it comes to civil unions. And yet what we had in 2015 was a one-size-fits-all, we're just going to push on this issue, left wins, game over. And
so Tyler, I all of that is obviously big picture zoomed out. I want to come back to the question about this coalition of groups because they seem focused on gay people who have children and gay people who have families. And I guess I can ask you once for yourself, and then also once what you think these coalition members would believe as well, because perhaps those are two different things. But I was struck by this example, and it's a personal anecdote, but just indulge me for a second here. I have a dear friend from college who grew up. She has two moms, so she had a sperm donor. She grew up and she became a public school teacher. She's heterosexual. She's marrying a man, and they're going to have children soon, I hope, because I think they'll be really sweet. And she's like a lovely person, and I'm so glad she exists. She's made such a positive impact on the world. But the position espoused by this coalition, and that I think you endorse to some extent, but feel free to draw a distinction if it's there, is that they did something wrong by using a sperm donor and bringing in a child not to be into the world, not to be raised by its biological mother and biological father. When you say things like all children have a natural right to be raised by their biological mother and father, I mean, I think the world is better off because my friend exists and her parents had a family. But do you also, what would you say that coalition would say as well?
Well, so I think every person is made in the image of God, and there is no person that I would say you shouldn't exist. I lament the death of every person, and I lament the death of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. And I don't think that your inherent moral dignity as a human being is reliant on the circumstances of your conception. But I do think that as when we're looking at the way that society is organized, I support the idea that marriage between a man and a woman should be the bedrock of our society. That does not mean that I think she shouldn't exist. That doesn't mean, I think we need to work these things out. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it does. If you're saying in the ideal world, you would cut down on those type. I mean, you're not saying that she specifically, now that she already does exist, should die, but you do think in the future there should be less of hers.
I mean, maybe put it this way. Put it this way, Tyler,
I don't
as a
get
yes
to
or
talk
no.
enough.
Sorry, Luke, but as a yes or no, did they do something immoral by creating her with a sperm donor? Yes or no, Tyler?
I mean, I think when it
You can say yes. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to call you any names. I promise. I at least would say that I think the majority of the people in this coalition would say yes. I think
I think that one is harder for me than issues with IVF, to be honest. I think whenever you're creating multiple embryos and freezing. No. And I think it's a revealing question. And honestly, I don't have a particular opinion myself. I know, I think that sort of insemination is not, but the difficulty is if you believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman and the ideal family structure is that, then to some degree, I think I have to say yes.
Okay.
I think
well,
I believe
that's the disagreement.
It
that's not what I believe, but that's your belief. Luke, final word to you on this topic. And I apologize for taking moderator's prerogative here a little bit, but
no, it's okay. So yeah, that's unfortunate. And it's funny because you can tell, I think, when an argument is weak, when the person, with all due respect, has to kind of fall back on nice sounding phrases, but can't really engage in the specifics or the real world consequences of their ideology. So just sort of I believe was a man and a woman, something. And it's none of, at least I can't speak for every random activist out there, but none of my ideology, and I know Brad's, is attempting to take away from straight couples and their ability to build a wonderful family. And one of the things you said interested me because you made it sound like in the marriage equality world, you're looked down upon if you have your view on marriage. And it's first of all, what percent? I looked it up and it was anywhere from 89 to 99% of marriages in the United States are straight couples. So it's that is still, to your point, the primary instance of marriage. And then churches aren't required to even honor and conduct gay marriages. So then your feeling of but we can't have our view. Yeah, you can. And then we just have ours and then everyone is happy. Yay.
All right, Tyler, brief response to you, then we'll wrap up here.
The main point is not that it's not this big divide between, yes, there are more straight marriages than there are gay marriages. But when you're talking about the stance that marriage is between a man and a woman, this conservative Christian, Jewish, Muslim stance, that is being demonized in the culture. And that's what I'm talking about. That's where
Not
you have
really.
groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center that essentially exist. They raise all their money by comparing people who hold this position to the Klan. And
Okay.
that's real.
Whatever.
And
All
you
right,
can, you can
guys.
shrug,
Well, I
you can
appreciate-
shrug it.
No.
I mean, it's very
Hey,
interesting how you have all this fun talk that
with
my
love.
arguments are weak, but then you're like, oh yeah.
That argument didn't. That's because it was such a random side point. If you feel like people are being mean to you, I'm sorry. Guess what? You want to hear the things people say about gay marriages? They're also really mean about them coming in the other direction. I want everyone to stop being mean, including liberals to conservatives. But I also want, based on data, to create the best society for everyone, for people who have straight marriages, who think it should only be that way. I want them to have the best life, and I want their family to be great. And then I also want, which we see in the research, for families relating to same-sex couples to have the best outcomes for their children. I want what they pretend like they want in that video. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm done.
All right, guys, I'm going to leave it there. I really appreciate both of you having a good spirited debate. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Do subscribe for more debates coming up soon, and we'll have to do this again sometime. Thanks to both of you gentlemen.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Tyler.